Welcome to the History Story Podcast. Buckle up, history buffs, because today we're hitting the road for a historic road trip, and this one's a real head-scratcher. We're diving deep into one of history's most baffling disappearances, the lost colony of Roanoke.
That's right. We're talking about 117 English men, women, and children who seemingly vanished into thin air from Roanoke Island in North Carolina. It all went down sometime between 1587 and 1590, and to this day, no one knows exactly what happened to them. But we're going to try to piece it together. You've shared a trove of history books and uncovered sources with us, and we're going to unpack the known facts, analyze those tantalizing clues, and explore the leading theories surrounding this enduring enigma.
This historic road trip is like your express lane to understanding the core of this historical puzzle. We'll highlight those surprising twists and turns and try to avoid overwhelming you with too much info. We want to equip you with the essential knowledge to spark your curiosity and maybe even inspire you to do some digging of your own.
Sounds like a plan. So, ready to hit the road and travel back in time to August 18th, 1590. Picture this. Your Governor John White finally returning to Roanoke Island after a 3-year delay thanks to England's war with Spain.
Oh, man. I can only imagine the anticipation, the excitement. It's a deeply personal moment, too, right? It's his granddaughter Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. He's expecting to see a thriving English settlement, a testament to their hard work and perseverance.
Exactly. But that's not what he found. As our sources detail, instead of a bustling colony, White stumbled upon, well, an empty settlement. But here's the thing. The houses weren't destroyed. They had been methodically dismantled, almost like they were carefully taken apart.
So it doesn't look like a random act of destruction. More like they were packing up and planning to relocate. And they even took the time to build that big defensive structure, that palisade. It's essentially a sturdy wall of large, pointed wooden stakes, almost like they were anticipating some kind of trouble.
Right, which adds another layer to this mystery. And the most unsettling part. There's no sign of a struggle, no bodies, no blood, nothing to indicate a battle or a massacre. Even heavy items, things you wouldn't easily carry, like iron bars, small cannons, those were just left behind.
So bizarre. It's like they just vanished into thin air.
Yeah.
But hold on. They did leave behind a few traces. Right?
Okay.
I found his own hidden chests, where he kept his maps and drawings. They had been dug up, broken open, and their contents scattered.
Yes, and the sources note something interesting here. It seems whoever did this only took the items they considered useful. So we're not looking at random looting here. There was a purpose to it.
It's also strange. And then, of course, there's the most famous clue in this whole mystery. The word CROATOAN, carved onto a prominent post of that palisade. And on a nearby tree, the letter CRO, just like that, carved into the wood. Almost like an unfinished message, a whisper from the past.
It's almost like they were trying to tell us something, but we only got a fragment of the message.
Absolutely. And remember that crucial pre-departure agreement. Before White left, the colonists agreed that if they had to relocate, they'd carve the name of their destination.
And there's one more crucial detail. They agreed that if they left due to danger or some kind of attack, they would carve a Maltese cross above the destination. But as you know, that distress signal was nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and that really fuels the intrigue, doesn't it? Because White, when he saw that CROATOAN carving, he was actually relieved. The sources describe him as greatly joyed. He believed they'd moved south to Croatoan Island, which we know today is Hatteras Island. That was the territory of the friendly Native American leader, Manteo, and White seemed to think they were safe there.
And you can understand why he'd jumped to that conclusion. However, if we consider that well-built palisade, that defensive structure, things get a bit murky. I mean, if you're planning a peaceful relocation to friendly territory, why go through the trouble of fortifying your settlement?
Yeah, that really throws a wrench in the works. It suggests there might have been some underlying fear, some sense of danger that prompted them to fortify the settlement before ultimately deciding to move.
Right, and it's just one of the many contradictions we're dealing with here.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this whole vanishing act, I think we need to go back in time, a little further back. We need to look at the events leading up to the establishment of this 1587 colony. Because this wasn't England's first attempt at settling Roanoke, was it?
Nope, not at all. The 1587 expedition had very different goals compared to that initial attempt in 1585. That first one was more of a military outpost. It was mostly men, led by Ralph Lane. The 1587 group was a different story. They were aiming for a permanent community, a lasting English settlement. 117 people, including women and children, families hoping to build a new life in this new world.
It's fascinating how their original destination wasn't even Roanoke Island, right? They were actually aiming for the Chesapeake Bay. Our history books and uncovered sources make that pretty clear.
And that's where the story takes an interesting turn. Sir Walter Raleigh and Governor White had chosen the Chesapeake Bay. They thought it was a much better, strategically sound location for a permanent colony. But their pilot, Simon Fernandez, well, he had other ideas.
He kind of threw a wrench in the works, didn't he?
He did. For reasons that are still debated today, though it's likely he had his own privateering interests further south, Fernandez refused to sail any further north. So the colonists were essentially stranded at Roanoke Island in July 1587. Not exactly the ideal start.
Talk about getting off on the wrong foot. They arrive at this abandoned fort, which was the remnants of that earlier failed attempt. And to make matters worse, they discover the skeletal remains of one of the 15 men who'd been left behind from that first venture. Can you imagine? What a grim welcome.
Yeah, definitely not the most encouraging sign. And to add insult to injury, they arrived late in the growing season, which meant they didn't have enough time to properly clear the land and plant crops for the coming winter. So right off the bat, they're staring down the very real threat of starvation.
And then there's that pre-existing tension with the local Native American tribes. The 1585 colony hadn't exactly made a good first impression, especially after that violent incident involving Chief Wangina.
Right, the killing of Wangina, or Pemisipan as he was also known, had created a climate of deep mistrust and hostility among some of the local Algonquian-speaking tribes. So the new arrivals in 1587 were already at a disadvantage when it came to establishing peaceful relations and securing those vital resources.
And tragically, the situation only worsened. The colonist George Howe is killed by some of the Roanoke warriors, and White, in a misguided act of retaliation, ends up attacking the friendly Croatoan people, even killing one of them. Talk about a devastating misstep, especially when you consider how much they needed native allies.
It was a terrible mistake that further strained relations with a tribe they desperately needed on their side. Yet even after this tragedy, Manteo, a prominent Croatoan leader, stayed loyal to the English. His baptism and the symbolic gesture of making him the Lord of Roanoke and Desamunkapuk speak volumes about the English desire to forge a strong alliance with at least one local group.
And amidst all this hardship and uncertainty, a beacon of hope arrives. The birth of Virginia Dare on August 18, 1587. The first English child born in the New World, a symbol of the colonists' determination to not just survive, but to build a future in this new land.
A truly remarkable event in a time of such turmoil. But with their supplies dwindling and the constant threat of further conflict with some Native American groups, the colonists make a tough decision. They urge Governor White to return to England.
They needed him to plead for reinforcements and desperately needed supplies. And White, although hesitant to leave his family in the struggling colony, ultimately agrees. So in late August of 1587, he sets sail for England, leaving behind his daughter, his granddaughter Virginia Dare, and the entire colony.
Right, and before his departure, he makes that crucial agreement with the colonists. If they had to relocate, they would carve the name of their destination onto a tree or post. They even discussed the possibility of moving 50 miles into the Main, meaning deeper into the mainland. And crucially, they agreed that if they left under duress or because of some kind of threat, they would add a Maltese cross above the carved location, a clear signal of distress.
And sounds like they had a solid plan. White expected to be back by the following spring, but as fate would have it, war breaks out between England and Spain. And this throws everything into disarray. Maritime travel is disrupted, privateering efforts are prioritized over colonial resupply, and White is stuck in England, unable to return.
This unexpected war leads to a 3-year delay in White's return. And as we know, those 3 years proved to be the pivotal turning point in this mystery.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the core of this historical enigma. What do we know for sure? Well, we know that 117 people were left on Roanoke Island in August of 1587.
That's right. And when White finally returns in August of 1590, he finds that abandoned settlement. It's fortified, remember, with that palisade, but there's no one there. All he finds is that cryptic Croatoan carving and the absence of that agreed-upon distress signal. Oh, and we also know that a huge storm prevented White from immediately sailing south to Croatoan Island to investigate.
It's almost as if history was conspiring against them, wasn't it?
It really seems that way.
So the million-dollar question, the question that has haunted historians and armchair detectives for centuries, what happened to the colonists? Did they make it to Croatoan Island? Did they venture into the mainland? Did they assimilate with the Native American tribes? Or were they victims of starvation, disease, or maybe even something more sinister?
So many questions and precious few answers.
Let's start with that primary clue that has fueled so much speculation. the Croatoan carving. As we've discussed, Governor White immediately assumed they had moved to Croatoan Island, present-day Hatteras Island, home of Manteo and the friendly Croatoan people. Seems logical enough, right?
It does, but we also have to consider that abbreviated CRO carving on the nearby tree. Makes you wonder if there's more to the message. Was it an incomplete thought? Did it point to a different location or maybe even a hidden meaning?
It's so frustrating, like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Right. And here's where the research gets really interesting. Organizations like the First Colony Foundation have been studying historical maps from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And what's interesting is that these maps primarily place the Croatoan people not on Hatteras Island, but rather on the mainland to the northwest of Roanoke.
So the Croatoan tribe may have shifted their primary location by 1590. So if that's the case, that CRO carving could have been directing White inland, not south, to Hatteras Island.
Exactly. It challenges White's immediate interpretation, but it does align with the colonists' discussion of moving 50 miles into the main before White's departure.
It definitely adds a new dimension to the investigation.
It does. Now, we can't completely rule out the possibility that the carving was intended as some kind of warning. However, the lack of the Maltese cross, that agreed-upon distress signal, seems to argue against any imminent danger at the time they left Roanoke.
So many possibilities, so much to consider. Okay, let's dive into the major theories that historians have put forward to explain this enduring mystery. It seems like the most favored theory is that the colonists assimilated with Native American tribes. And the Croatoan carving seems to support that, wouldn't you say?
It does, and the lack of any clear evidence for a violent conflict at Roanoke makes that theory even more compelling. And within this theory, the idea that they moved to Croatoan Island, what we now know as Hatteras Island, is a very real possibility.
There's a lot of interesting archaeological evidence from Cape Creek on Hatteras Island. What kind of stuff have they found there?
They found 16th century European artifacts mixed with Native American tools and pottery. We're talking sword hilts, gun parts, copper, iron, even a gold ring and part of a writing tablet. It suggests that these two groups were living together, interacting beyond simple trade.
And then there's that fascinating account from John Lawson in 1709. He writes about encountering Hatteras Indians who claimed to be descended from the Roanoke colonists. They supposedly had European features and even oral traditions about reading from a book. That's pretty convincing anecdotal evidence, wouldn't you say?
It definitely lends credence to the idea of integration on Hatteras Island, but then we also have the theory that some colonists may have gone inland. This aligns with those early discussions of moving 50 miles into the main and the possibility of that inland fort symbol on White's map.
Right. And the archaeological discoveries at those sites they call Site X and Site Y in Bertie County, North Carolina, those seem pretty important too. I mean, finding datable Elizabethan-era pottery, early gun flintlocks, specific types of clothing fasteners, it really suggests that Europeans were living alongside Native Americans in that region before Jamestown was established in 1607.
Absolutely. Researchers like Nicholas Lechetti believe those finds are solid evidence that at least some of the Roanoke settlers moved inland towards the Chowan River and integrated with local Algonquian-speaking groups.
And then there's the connection to the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Their oral histories tell of being descended from Roanoke survivors who intermarried with various coastal Algonquian tribes, including the Croatoan, maybe even some Siouan-speaking groups.
The Lumbee connection is really intriguing. They point to several strands of evidence. You have the English surnames within the tribe that echo those of the Roanoke colonists. There are historical accounts from early explorers describing Lumbee individuals with European features. Then there's their early adoption of English and fluency in the language, and even some linguistic patterns that some researchers think could hold clues to their origins.
It's fascinating, and it really adds to the complexity of this whole story.
It certainly does, but it's also important to acknowledge that there are other theories about the origins of the Lumbee people, and those are still debated among historians.
Right. It's a reminder that history is rarely straightforward.
Never is.
Okay, so while assimilation seems like the most likely scenario, we do have to at least consider the possibility of a massacre, however unlikely. I mean, could they have been attacked and killed by Native Americans despite the Croatoan carving and the lack of a distress signal?
Well, we can't completely discount that theory. We know there was violence between the earlier 1585-86 colony and the local tribes, and then there's White's own retaliatory attack on the Croatoan. Plus, there are those later accounts from Jamestown about Powhatan attacking English settlers who entered his territory. But the lack of any bodies or signs of a violent struggle at Roanoke makes a large-scale massacre there seem pretty improbable.
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile that with the message they seemingly left behind, pointing white to CROATOAN.
Exactly.
So what about the Spanish? England and Spain were rivals at the time, and Spain wasn't exactly thrilled about English colonization efforts in North America. Could they have been involved in the disappearance?
It's a valid question. We know the Spanish had destroyed a French colony in Florida in 1565, and they were known to be scouting the Atlantic coast. But there's no concrete evidence in Spanish historical records of an attack on the 1587 colony. Plus, again, no signs of a violent confrontation at the settlement itself.
So, while it's a possibility, it doesn't seem like the most likely explanation. What about the environmental factors? Starvation must have been a constant threat, especially with that severe drought the region was experiencing.
Absolutely. Research on tree rings has shown that the period between 1587 and 1589 was the driest three-year period in 800 years. Imagine that. That kind of severe drought would have made it almost impossible to grow crops, both for the colonists and the Native American populations. It could have led to food shortages, people scattering in search of resources, and ultimately, starvation.
A grim picture. And then there's disease.
Right. European diseases could have devastated the colonists. However, there are no identified burial sites at Roanoke, which makes this theory less likely.
What about the weather? The Outer Banks are known for their wild weather. Could a massive storm, a hurricane maybe, have wiped them out?
The Outer Banks are definitely prone to powerful storms. However, White describes the palisade still standing, and the houses were dismantled, not destroyed by wind or waves. It doesn't really fit the picture of a major hurricane wiping out the colony without a trace.
And of course, we can't forget the less conventional theories. Some of them are pretty out there, right?
Oh, yeah. The mystery has definitely sparked some imaginative explanations. Everything from supernatural interventions, spirits, alien abductions, you name it.
Zombies even, right? I've heard that one.
Oh yeah, the zombies. Those theories are entertaining, of course, but they lack any credible historical or archaeological backing.
So let's bring it back to the realm of serious scholarship. Where does the current consensus among historians lie regarding the fate of the lost colony?
The prevailing view, as we've discussed, is that they assimilated with various Native American tribes. And this split theory that some went south to Croatoan Island, present-day Hatteras, while others moved inland towards the Towan River, it's gaining more and more traction, especially as new archaeological evidence emerges. It's a reminder that historical research is ongoing, and our understanding evolves as new data comes to light.
It's amazing how this story, over 4 centuries old, still has such a hold on us. It's often called America's oldest unsolved mystery. Why do you think the lost colony of Roanoke continues to fascinate people?
I think it's that very lack of a definitive answer. It's an enigma, a blank canvas onto which we can project our own interpretations, our anxieties about the past. It allows us to keep re-examining it, reinterpreting it in light of current events and our own understanding of history.
And the figure of Virginia Dare, that first English child born in the New World, she's become almost mythical in this narrative, hasn't she?
Absolutely. She embodies the vulnerability, the uncertain promise of those early colonial ventures. She's been romanticized in popular culture, unfortunately co-opted at times too, but she remains a powerful symbol of both hope and mystery.
And the mystery of Roanoke has certainly permeated popular culture. We see it reflected in literature, film, TV shows, video games, you name it.
Oh, absolutely. The mystery has been explored in so many ways. Think about books by Stephen King, Harlan Ellison, shows like American Horror Story, Roanoke. Even video games and comic books have taken inspiration from it. The word CROATOAN itself has become synonymous with unexplained disappearances.
It's a story that continues to resonate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looking back at this early attempt at English colonization, did Roanoke teach England any lessons that informed their later, more successful settlement at Jamestown in 1607?
It's an important question to ask. Despite the tragic fate of Roanoke, Jamestown, established just 2 decades later, faced a lot of the same challenges. Disease, starvation, strained relationships with the Powhatan Confederacy. It suggests that maybe the lessons of Roanoke weren't fully learned, or that the challenges of establishing a permanent colony in a new environment were just that massive.
Maybe a bit of both.
Probably. But Jamestown's location, further inland, away from the immediate coast, might have been a strategic decision informed by Roanoke's vulnerability on the Outer Banks.
It's a possibility worth considering. So, as we wrap up our historic road trip, it really comes down to that one central unanswered question. What truly happened to the lost colony? And that's what keeps historians digging, keeps us fascinated, right?
Exactly. The mystery continues to fuel historical research and capture our imaginations.
And the story of Roanoke reminds us of the risks, the uncertainties, the complexities of early colonization, and the often tragic interactions between European settlers and indigenous peoples.
For those listening who are now eager to dig deeper into this mystery, there are some really great places to connect with this story.
Yeah, let's talk about those.
Well, first off, you got to visit Fort Raleigh National Historic Site on Roanoke Island. It's the actual historical location. There's a visitor center, a reconstructed earthwork fort, and interpretive trails that bring the story to life. Then there's The Lost Colony, that long-running outdoor drama that tells a romanticized version of the events. And of course, the beautiful Elizabethan gardens nearby, which serve as a memorial to the colonists.
Those are great places to start. What about resources for those who want to delve into the primary source material, the scholarly research, the nitty-gritty?
There are some incredible resources out there. You can check out John White's own accounts, published in Richard Hecklute's Principal Navigations, for his first-hand perspective on the 1590 discovery. White's detailed watercolors, housed at the British Museum, offer a visual glimpse into the Carolina Algonquian people and the natural environment. Thomas Harriot's A Brief and True Report of the Newfound Land of Virginia from 1588 provides valuable ethnographic insights into the customs and resources of the Algonquian tribes.
I always find those primary sources to be so powerful, those voices from the past,
They're amazing, aren't they?
So where else should our listeners look?
Well, you can look at other early accounts, like the 1584 report by Amadas and Barlow, letters from Ralph Lane during the 1585-86 colony, and even the desperate plea from the colonists urging White to return. These accounts can really flesh out the story.
It's often those little details, those overlooked pieces of the puzzle that can lead to new insights. For example, there was that earlier disappearance, the one we mentioned earlier, that small English garrison left behind in 1586 that vanished without a trace.
Yeah, that's a really good example. The fate of those 15 men, and reports suggesting a violent end, foreshadowed the dangers inherent in that environment.
Definitely. And it seems like specific archaeological finds can hold so much potential for unlocking more secrets.
They absolutely do. For instance, the discovery of that gold signet ring at Cape Creek, those specific pottery types found at Site X and Site Y, even the pieces of slate writing tablets. And then there are the Dare stones. They turned out to be hoaxes, but they played a role in the public's fascination with this mystery. And we can't forget about the efforts of Spanish intelligence to monitor English colonization. That broader geopolitical context can be really illuminating.
It's like a giant puzzle with so many different pieces. And then there's the environmental backdrop, that severe drought of the late 1580s, which adds another layer of complexity.
Right. It helps us understand the challenges faced by both the colonists and the Native Americans.
So for our listeners who are now itching to embark on their own investigations into the Lost Colony, where can they go for reliable resources?
Oh, there are so many. For local historical materials, the Outer Banks History Center in Manteo is a fantastic resource. You can also check out the State Archives of North Carolina and the NC Digital Collections for a ton of digitized documents. The National Park Service website for Fort Raleigh is excellent, too. And on a national level, the Library of Congress and the British Museum have a lot of relevant primary source material.
Those are great starting points. What about online resources?
Online platforms like Digital NC and Documenting the American South, also known as DocSouth, are treasure troves of historical texts. And if you're interested in ongoing research, check out the websites of the First Colony Foundation and the CROATOAN Archaeological Society. There are also tons of documentaries available on PBS, National Geographic, and the History Channel. And of course, there are all those books we've mentioned by authors like Quinn, Lawler, Dawson, and Miller, and lots of scholarly articles available through databases like JSTOR and Project MUSE. Oh, and if you're exploring online forums like Reddit, just be sure to approach everything critically. Always double-check information from reputable sources.
Solid advice. Always be a discerning consumer of information, especially online.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, it seems like the story of the lost colony of Roanoke will always be shrouded in a certain amount of mystery. It's a story about the uncertainties of the past, the complex and often tragic interactions of early colonization.
And based on all the evidence we've explored from history books and uncovered sources, the most likely scenario is that the colonists left Roanoke Island, possibly guided by that Croatoan carving. Maybe they were searching for allies, maybe they were seeking better resources.
It really makes you wonder what those first encounters between the English settlers and the Native Americans were truly like beyond the official accounts. What stories are still waiting to be uncovered, hidden within archaeological sites or preserved in the oral histories of indigenous communities?
Exactly. This historic road trip into the Lost Colony leaves us with as many questions as answers, which is part of what makes it so endlessly fascinating.
A true historical enigma. Well, thank you for joining us on this captivating historic road trip into the mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke. If you uncover any interesting insights in your own explorations, be sure to share them with us.
We'd love to hear from you.
And be sure to join us next time on the History Story Podcast for another thrilling adventure into the stories that have shaped our world. Until then, keep exploring.